Hi, I'm Hope Young, and this is Listening with Hope podcast. I'm here today at the Music Box on Lake Austin with our special guest, Andy Thomas, and his wife, Shermakaye Bass. Today, we're going to hear the amazing story from Andy's traumatic brain injury through rehabilitation to an amazing performance with Andy on stage playing with jazz legend Stanley Jordan. Just thank you for sharing your story, because it's a very powerful story. And what I'd like to know is that you, Andy, you had a head injury, a traumatic brain injury by a severe trauma to your brain that was very damaged and even took part of your brain. So when you talked to us before that, let's just start with before the accident. Will you just tell us, what life was like?
Well, it's strange to look back and think about how I was behaving or what I was doing, because I was just doing what happened naturally. But it was very different after the gunshot, and I just was a different person. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't lost on me. It was very apparent. And so I'm just still working, trying to get through. I'm not done. I'm not through yet.
So it's hard for you, Andy, to remember your life before, and it was an accidental discharge right into...
No.
No?
It was here.
It was here. Ouch.
We were on a road trip. It was during pandemic, and we had gone to stay at a friend's casita up in Taos. And it was in November of 2020. We hadn't left our house, in months. So anyway, we were out having a good old time. Andy's a realtor, and we had a good year, and we were like, let's just celebrate. It was my birthday, Day of the Dead. So anyway, we were finishing up our trip to Taos, and we're in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, staying at a fancy hotel downtown, and Andy was packing up our gear. And because we were on a road trip, he had brought his handgun. He's not a big gun advocate, but he had brought it. And I said, I'm going to go to bed. It's 9:30. We were going to leave at 4 a.m, get home before the election returns.
Oh.
That was the plan. And I said, Andy, I'm going to go on and go to sleep. You pack up. And in the closet, there was a very deep closet. It was a big room at La Fonda. And at the very back of it was a gun safe where Andy had put his gun. When we checked in a couple of days before, sorry. And that's where he put his gun. And so I was in bed, so I don't really know exactly how it happened, and he certainly doesn't. But it was on the ground in the corner, bad position, and Andy's real tall, and he was unpacking it, and either he fumbled it or it just discharged, and it went...
I don't know.
Yeah, I know you don't remember. But it went diagonally from this side underneath the surface of the face and exited right there, took out your left eye, clipped a substantial portion of your left frontal lobe, which, is executive function. I learned about this. But that's what happened. And
there's actually a piece missing of your brain. You're actually missing brain tissue now.
And I just happened to hear the gunshot. Because it was deep closet, big room. I was asleep or going to sleep. And so I was startled and confused what it was. And I called around and it was dark. And I just instinctively jumped out of bed and ran into the closet when I didn't find him around. And he was slumped over in the closet over the gun safe. And the gun was right there. And I knew that it was an accident. I just thought, how on earth did this happen? But he was still moving. He was bleeding profusely. And, but I saw that he was moving, so I knew he was alive. And I pulled him dragged him out and propped him up on my chest because I just instinctively knew he would asphyxiate on his own blood. So I propped him up and got the sheets and towels and found my phone and immediately called 911. And we were staying downtown on the square. So fortunately for us, fire station is directly across the street, and they were there in a heartbeat. It just all was kismet that where we were that day, because normally we stay on the outskirts of town, but we just decided to whoop it up and stay at La Fonda, and and it was my birthday, and anyway, so everything happened in a really amazing, spectacular way. And there's one thing that you might want to hear that I reflect on now, is that earlier in the day, before this happened, this is the kind of person Andy is. So he engenders good karma. We were out on the square, and we were sitting outside eating, and I asked Andy to go around the corner to check and see when this other restaurant was going to open. It was all outdoor eating at that time. And he comes back, and he's got in his hand this velvet pouch. They're all over. Everybody who sells jewelry in Santa Fe has these little purple velvet drawstring pouches for jewelry. Yes. He comes around and he shows me this. He goes, "Look what I just found." And he opens it, and these 2 giant chunks of turquoise, like really high grade. And I'm like, wow, well, and I jokingly said, "Oh, well, finders keepers." And he's like, and I was joking, but I thought, how on earth are we going to find out who these belong to? And he said, "Here's what we're going to do." He said, "We're going to sit right here." And he said, for at least an hour, we're going to wait. And he said, somebody is going to come around this plaza frantic, and they're going to be looking at the ground, and we'll know. So sure enough, about 15 minutes later, this woman comes. She's on the other side of the plaza, and Andy goes, "Let's check her out." And she was looking, and then, tears in her eyes, and Andy finally said, "Ma'am, come here." And so she came over, and he said, "What are you looking for?" And she said, I just purchased these turquoise for my fiance, her future wife. It was, a couple. And he said, "Well, here they are." And I swear later, when I think back on all the kismet and all the connections, things that just happened, like almost as if an angel were on our shoulder, I connect it back to that too. I'm like, not many people would have done that. They might have gone to a hotel and said, here's a lost and found. And he just said, "Here's what we're going to do." And I'm like,
When did you two meet each other in life? When did Shermakaye and Andy Thomas fall in love or meet? How long ago was that?
I don't really recall.
well, can I give you a hint?
Yes.
It was the late 90s,
Yeah.
1998.
98?
Yep. Well, we met in 97. We became friends first, and we were friends for a year.
With that long-term memory coming back, what do you remember most about this girl when you first met her and saw her as your...
Well, I was pretty goofy over her.
How old were you think? What, were you in your 20s? Were you a teenager? Were you in your 20s? What do you remember? 30s?
Well, no, I was just pretty crazy about her from the get-go. And, but...
30. I was at your 30th birthday. I'm the older woman.
Oh! You cougar.
3 years older. But we were just friends when you had your 30th birthday.
So speaking of friends and friendship, so if you were 30 and you were 33, you both, one of the things that I can say about you since I met you first, Shermakaye, when I met her, huge part of the Austin arts, music, and even nationally, Shermakaye has written for large national publications. You When did you start doing your work with South by Southwest? Because you did that at least over 20 years.
I mean, I know you had connections with them and were interacting with them, but you started working with them as an APM, which is Associate Production Manager, directly under Brent Grolke, who was at the time the creative director. May he rest in peace. And so that would have been like 2099. It was not long after.
1999?
Probably right around.
2000.
And
So a long time. So maybe not in the early days.
yeah, and overseeing certain clubs like Continental, Town Lake Stage,
Okay.
Saxon
so it's
Pub.
the venues.
Yeah, there were several. At the time, there were maybe 10 APMs. Now there are maybe 20 or 30, but each had their groups of clubs. But yeah, he was the boss of those clubs.
So when you guys met, you were already, these big parts of the whole Austin music and arts community, because everywhere I go, everybody knows you. When, like I said, the Chronicle, Jody Bimberg, everybody knows you. Of course, Ray Benson knew you and your story well. So let me ask, in the context of pre-injury, how do you think that arts and music played in your lives together and the community?
Well, it's something that changes yearly because where you are mentally in your mind and where your friends are, or your friends that might be involved in music production or writing or whatnot, they're also evolving. So it was fun and it wasn't boring.
Sounds like a lot of collaboration.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah, there was a good bit of collaboration, and it was a good time was had.
And you also, how many bands have you played in during all that fun and collaboration? Tell me about your bands.
10 or 15 bands.
There was a punk band that you showed me videos of you playing, because when I asked you what your favorite style is, you like punk. You like the shredder rock, but you like punk.
Yeah, I'm
You're
pretty
a punk
much
guy.
And blues. He's
That's
And very good at blues.
very blues.
But when you grin and you like the punk, some of that, one of those bands especially, you.
Yeah, it's something about it.
Is it Gay Sportscasters?
Yeah. Gay Sportscasters was one of the
Yeah. And Rockland Eagles.
bands. But and Rockland Eagles. But yeah, it's just good old wholesome fun.
Good old wholesome rock and roll.
When did you start that wholesome fun? When did you start playing guitar, and when in your life did music lead you to that path in the music industry? Part of South by Southwest, playing in bands, being such a rich part of this music community. When did music start for you?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't long after I'd moved to Austin where I'd kind of just decided that was part of something I was going to be involved in.
The music scene.
So
what was your main instrument at that time? Voice, guitar, drums?
just guitars.
Just guitar?
Guitars and basses.
But you started playing in Mobile, Alabama
That's what I was going to say. When did you start guitar? When did you have your first lessons and begin to learn?
13 or 14 or so.
That late, huh?
It was late, yeah.
Because that's amazing.
I was late to rock.
So you're the music guy, playing guitar as a teenager. You land on the Austin music scene, and you decide I want to be a part of this scene. Yeah. Shermakaye, tell us about how you got involved, because you're, like I said, you both are so woven into this whole music community.
But yeah, I moved here, and Michael Barnes, who's a dear friend, had followed me at the morning news, and he asked me to start writing for the Statesman. And so I did, and then they gave me a column. So what I did, it was a Sunday arts column, and as well as a lot of features. When I was writing I'm semi-retired, as I say. But I was prolific. I loved to write. So I'd write at least a feature a week and a column. And it was really, a lot of it was visual arts related. I've always been drawn to, besides music, art and architecture and performance art, sort of off the wall stuff. And so I did stories on anything from like the lowrider scene when nobody was writing about that, to Burning Man. I had gone out to Burning Man and wrote some stories about that for the Statesman. And it was just, I've always gravitated towards the arts. I'm not an artist, I'm not a musician, but I found myself absolutely enthralled and enraptured. So I just became really involved with local people, and they embraced me. I was very fortunate, and I was really fortunate to have walked into the Dog and Duck pub, may it rest in peace, the second or third day I was here, and my friend Allison Young, who took me there, said, this is where you're gonna hang out. This is where you're gonna meet all your friends. And almost all of my best friends and connections do stem back from ye old Dog and Duck pub.
So the community, right? So this community and this girl that you're pretty crazy about, it sounds like the arts and music are a big part of your
Yes.
whole identity as a couple in your community.
Yeah, she definitely,
Inseparable from our identity.
she definitely was, or is.
And I love how, your stories together with the arts. When coming back to the accident, how did this community, you think the arts and music community, play into your survival first?
Within a week, McCoy and many other musicians in town and friends of mine had organized a GoFundMe and raised us about $35,000 in a month, less than a month. That's how loved he is. And at the time, I had no idea I didn't even know if you were gonna live.
Yeah.
The odds of you even surviving the gunshot wound and then surviving that 9-hour surgery where they had to reconstruct everything. The injury is left side, and it exited right there. But anyway, I'm kind of not being linear, but the fact that I did not know if he was going to survive. I did not know if our insurance would cover it. I did not know anything. So our friends immediately started raising money for us. And then I was in New Mexico for 3.5 weeks at a hotel that was just, I could literally look out my window and see the hospital, but it was pandemic and they wouldn't let me in. He wasn't dying, he was getting better. Oh. So they're like, if he's dying, we'll let you in. And I'm like, well, then don't let me in. I don't need to come in because he ain't dying. But anyway, so several friends agreed to come out and stay.
And this is New Mexico.
This was in New Mexico.
So this is the trauma center.
It's the immediate
Yes.
aftermath.
Just trying to save your life, literally surviving.
But
Yeah.
all these people.
That kind of gunshot wound, that close, most people don't survive, Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all those people got on planes in the middle of a pandemic and came and stayed with me. And I cannot tell you what that meant.
Community.
Oh, God. So that's the kind of a community that we have. I'm sorry.
Musicians and artists.
And they don't have money. I don't know where $35,000 came from. I think there were some, a few big contributions, but it was all grassroots.
With music and the community and the friendship, in that story, you went from New Mexico and the friends flooding in, those deep bonds, and you could just really feel everybody holding Shermakaye up, and of course the medical community was holding your life, right, in its hands. What happened next?
I had to reconnect to how I functioned and how I lived in Austin and in town, and that took me a bit, and but yeah, I got with that, and then I've just been kind of slowly working to get back to however I was or whatnot. But yeah, things are
Still getting better.
okay. Yeah.
Still getting, like I said, you're still in the middle of recovery. Like 5 years, this is that first big push after coming off of a traumatic brain injury like you. And were you in a coma?
He wasn't in a coma. Like I could come in and some days
So his eyes were open or they were not?
they could open. But
they were
then
mainly
after
closed.
after the fluid got on the brain, it was very close to comatose, but he wasn't, because I could get him, not all the time, but to squeeze my hand, wiggle the toes, or when I would come in the door, I always wore my jangly bracelets. And even when he was way down under, several times when I came in with my bracelets, his head would turn toward the door.
Tell me the significance of those bracelets. You keep talking about, I know we had to have to take it off so it didn't keep messing up the mic.
There's a
But tell us
jangle.
about that jingle jangle. You jingle and jangle. And
I don't know if you remember this, but every morning, once we got you out of Del Seaton and you finally got the shunt and things started improving.
And that shunt went into his brain.
Yeah.
And it drains off the pressure. There was too much pressure on your brain from fluid building up.
From the CSF, yeah.
And finally, and it was Dr. Morledge.
Who got that done.
Who got that done.
It wasn't going to happen because,
Without him.
no, the people that I was dealing with were convinced that Andy was not going to make it.
You literally got on the phone, you yanked the chains, and you got who? How did you get to Dr. Morledge again?
Well, it took circuitous, but I finally circumvented the neuro staff at Del Seaton by contacting a friend of a friend who ran rehabilitative and physical medicine, neurology at UT Medicine, which is, of course, affiliated with Del Seaton. She's the head of rehabilitative and physical medicine. I got her to come over. I told her the situation. I'm like, he's going to die in here if we don't get something done. She agreed to come over and do tests on Andy. And with talking with the neuro staff up there, they agreed. And that morning, before she and her assistant came in, I told Andy, please do anything she asks you to do. If she asks you wiggle your toes, do it, squeeze her hand. Sure enough, she came in. He was on fire, and he squeezed her hand, he wiggled his toes. If he could have done a song and dance, he would have. And she said, he's not in a coma. And I said, I know. So she said at that time, I'm going to get him on an experimental drug, amantadine, and we'll see if this brings him up. Within 3 days, he was way better. We were able to get discharged and accepted back to Texas Neuro. The surgery still had not been done.
No, that's what I was going to say. Okay, so
No, they
now you're
refused-
back at Texas Neuro.
Got back
where
to Texas
Dr.
Neuro.
Morledge has...
And Morledge took one look at him and said the midline of the brain had been pushed so far to the right that if it were to go a little bit over, instant death.
It would have been, and I was
so
going to
Morledge
say,
knew
yes.
it was urgent, and he did what no one else could have done. Otherwise, I would have lost my husband.
And he did.
And you also were, I know I'm jumping forward, but I will just say, Andy's had so much wonderful therapy. I mean, we've had great, great people. But the music therapy that you gave Andy for what, almost 2 years, and it was at least once or twice a week, or you or your associates, was the most significant therapy in Andy's recovery.
There's a common thing that happens with brain injury, and I'll just say as a professional in this field, there's the 6 months after the injury as where we tend to say how much a person's going to come back, right? But that's old thinking. That's very, very old thinking. But when you get discharged to home because you're in the hospital, you get a lot of intensive daily They're by specialists who know brain injury. You go home, sometimes it can flatten out, and that's as good as you're ever going to get. Or if somebody's carrying a vision for you, and if you have an advocate, and you have community that is bound by more than just external transactional relationships, and what can I have you done for me lately, that is really driven from a soulful place.
Deep spiritual connections.
People go home and they can make incredible recovery still out of the hospital. So that's where I picked up the story. And what I remember most, Andy, was what Shermakaye told me. She said on that phone call, she told me your history, and before she let me go, she said, Hope, I remember what you've done for so many people. And I remember the stories and what music can do. I'm asking you to do this for my husband. And she said, I have a vision of my husband, of Andy, of him playing on stage, again, with his guitar. She goes, I see it so clear. And she goes, you haven't met him yet, and you don't know him, but I believe in his spirit. And music is such a part of his life. I see him playing on that stage, playing his guitar fully. Based on what she had just told me, your story, of course, my name's Hope. So there's no way I contradicted her. And I said, yes, I will be there. Let me know how I can help. I'm here, I'm in. But I have to tell you, it was a big ask, the idea of you playing on stage. And so in my head, and as I told my staff, I called Dr. Morlich, and I asked him for insight. He and I both, we were going to take you as far as we could take you, but a lot of the work was going to be yours.
Yeah.
And it was going to come where the spirit leads, the body follows. But with a brain injury as severe as yours, there's some things that you can't quite put back together, and you have to find your new norm. And I would be a part of whatever journey we were about to go on. I was all in, but there was just so much contusion. When Dr. Morlich described some of the damage in the areas that your hands completely, and several other things, the speech, I had in my mind, I had her vision in mind that, we had adaptive ways you might be able to play guitar, or that we play parts, you play the other, because I wanted to see that vision, and I wanted to be there. But I just am telling you, I said I'm all in, and I was, and we jumped right in.
And I said, I don't think my insurance will cover it, and you said, we will work something out.
Yeah.
And you worked with us, and you really worked with us. I will say that. I don't think any of us expected. We didn't know what to expect.
But you had that vision, and you never let my feet or envious up the fire. And you talked to him all the time.
Oh, I talked.
You talked to him about his music. You constantly talked to Andy like he never had a head injury.
Another very, very critical group was Collage with Amy Doran, and she was our caseworker, and that group. And they came to our house 3 times a week. It was physical, speech, recreational, and something else. 3 times a week for at least a year. And they got splints over the course of about 8-9 months or a year. You remember those deadgum things? The splints? Not really.
I mean,
They were,
I
is what I'm
remember them
saying.
a little bit, but
They're like spring loaded, and anyway. So those guys were incredibly helpful too. And one thing Amy at Collage told me, she said, one of the reasons Andy continues to recover is, she said, he wants to.
He does.
She said, a lot of people I've seen in this kind of situation get depressed and they don't advance. And she said, Andy is driven. And she said, I don't know if it's because of you or what. And I said, well, I'm sure it's both.
I agree.
Because at one point she asked him, you're doing this for her, aren't you? And he said, yeah. And I said, some, but Andy's a survivor.
And you guys are for each other.
Fierce spirit, let me tell you.
I've been now on your journey. You guys are totally for each other. Let's pick up the story about occupational therapy, physical therapy, rec therapy, speech therapy, your speech and your thoughts. So, and with music therapy, one of the ways that when I talk about music therapy's role, especially in traumatic brain injury or neuro rehab. I talk about it as the secret sauce that you couldn't have gotten anywhere without Dr. Morledge, without the nurses, without the occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, all this. And where, a lot of us who work on teams together, we integrate all that. But music tends to come in as the secret sauce that kind of pulls it all together, and it accelerates and catalyzes all the other therapies in your progress very quickly. So that's what you observed and what you experienced.
How does that actually work?
It's a science and it's an art. And the brain, realize that it is a human phenomenon. Do you guys all know that? The oral sensitivities, for some reason, it is one of the defining things of what makes us human is musicality in music.
Wow.
No other species has it. And so for our 40,000 years and even before, music and this development of, it's called oral sensitivity. We always think of music being done to us, but actually we're the ones who create music. We are music without all that musicality. Musicality of pitch, melody, timbre, inflection. It is so deeply baked in to the core brainstem of your brain that controls breathing, that keeps you alive, the heartbeat, literally. Ancient Egyptians the physicians had to be musicians. There was no electronics back then, so the listening to the heart and the fluids, if it was a little bit out of rhythm, that extra training musicians have makes you extra sensitive to your hearing, trains it to hear when it's going out of rhythm or a little different, right? As a science, knowing what to do and what not to do. Remember, we talked a lot about you were getting overstimulated by music at first. Remember, I was pretty clear.
I was pushing him too hard.
So the brain has to rest. The brain, you have to kind of do a bottoms-up approach to rebuild. And so when people talk about when music, if you were playing music, singing music, reading music, your brain would light up like a Christmas tree. It's the only thing that we have in all of the world that can activate all areas of the brain simultaneously. So what I need to do is when to do that and when not to do it, and what I could do that would localize and build back key things, like with the music in general. When you're overstimulating, your muscles were over. We're getting unwanted movement. That's why I went back to voice and I went back to certain things and simplified so the muscles. I wasn't activating areas of the brain that I did not intend to activate.
And see, I wasn't in there with you guys, so I didn't. That makes sense, though.
And then there were times that we were doing the emotional memory. So if it was a muscle movement, we were trying to get your hands, we're very careful not to do a lot of sounds and to keep the stimulus, but still musical. When it came to your memories, and do you remember me pushing you on memories? That's when I played a whole song, and we'd interviewed, my whole staff had interviewed and got as much knowledge about your musical history. And so we played songs from your early life, your teens. And slowly bringing you back step by step, and then you just keep reaching. But this is the person who carried the advocacy, the love. And I want to talk about that.
Don't you forget it.
I want to talk about the love. Did you ever imagine that you were capable of this kind of love? Because the reason I'm going to say that, it's very common for marriages not to make it after a traumatic brain injury as serious as yours. A lot of relationships don't make it.
I'm just crazy about you.
Still. If I could put your guitar in your hands, you could play that beautifully, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that throughout this journey, I know that it's been irritating and frustrating to Andy as the recovery has continued. Because, he's driving, going to the grocery store, making a list, going to the store. He drove himself to Texas Neuro when he was doing outpatient therapy. It's just around the corner. And slowly has recovered a lot of the skills he had before. And at times I know that my pushing has caused friction. Which sometimes I'm just like, I'm going to go in the back of the house. You stay up here somewhere. But Never once was there ever even a thought in my mind of us not making it. And I didn't know where Andy was going to land, and he still hasn't landed. I mean, I'm hoping it's a lifelong recovery. The key thing to me, knowing that there was possible life after this, whether it was limited or what, was when he came out of the 9-hour surgery in New Mexico. It was in Albuquerque, University of New Mexico. A wonderful neurosurgeon named Dr. Christian Ricks, who I'm still in contact with. I send him updates regularly. And he's like, oh my God, he's our miracle kid. But when Andy got out of the surgery, and we would do, FaceTime every evening when he was in there. I mean, even if he could look at me sometimes, but he would indicate that he could hear me. So every evening, I would play him these songs and soundtracks that all his friends had
So you
sent.
were playing music.
I was playing it for him 2 days after the surgery. But what I get ahead of myself. When he got out of the surgery and they had him on an iPad and he was in a wheelchair and I was on my computer in my hotel room, and I said, Andy, because Dr. Ricks had said, look, we don't know if he's going to survive the surgery. We don't know if he will be comatose or ever able to function again. We don't know. Came out, and I said, Andy, hey, how are you doing, Andy? And looked straight into the FaceTime and I went, holy cow. That is the moment, really, the moment. Well, Allie had just been through a 9-hour surgery with 6 different surgeons, survived the initial wound. So when he came out of that and gave me the thumbs up, I mean, literally, Dr. Ricks was, there, and the nurses, and they were all like gobsmacked.
I remember I did something with music, and I could see Shermakaye and you just holding each other, so I can just be a witness to its inside and outside. Music has completely engulfed you. And I know that I knew how the special mechanisms inside, what not to do, what to do to keep building up. And I want to ask, as we went on the journey, and then I even got to use, you let me experiment on you with some of our new tech that I developed. And because once you started coming back, and your hands even, I started getting you on piano and
keyboard,
keys, started getting your fingers moving, started then being able to get you back to working the fretboard. I was amazed, right? And that was very much your musical brain. There was nothing else, honestly, that could have brought this kind of fine motor, everything. That was your musical brain. I accessed it, you were ready. But the memory and the words and the attention to get you on stage, I actually started seeing that we could get you to that goal of being on stage, and you actually told me you wanted to. Do you remember what you said to me? Do you remember when I mentioned, do you think?
I want to know. I'm not gonna guess.
You did the first. You thought about it because I realized, you weren't fully back.
Yeah.
To even think about being on stage, it's up to you. That's your wife's vision, but do you want it?
Yeah.
And you pulled back and you said, And it took you a long time to think. But yeah, you said, yeah. But it was fun, and it was, words were hard for you, but they're all right, and you looked me right in the eye. And then you just smiled really big, and you beamed the way you beam. And so we started, I told you I'd have to push you harder. And I did, and it hurt a little bit because I had to kind of push you more aggressively. But then we started getting your memory. I started using some of the tech only I had access to, and we made it. And then I told Stanley Jordan, my friend, about you, and he invited you to play with us. That night, it was Stanley Jordan on stage, Ray Benson, your doctor, Dr. David Morledge, myself, and then we had Jessica on bass, and we had James on drums. That night that you played, do you remember what it felt like once you started playing? When you took that first lead and that first solo, what did it feel like?
It was a powerful moment. It was, I didn't know what to expect. So I just kind of went up there and started. But when I was listening to them and whatnot, I just really got into it. And it was a powerful moment. It was.
The song was Stand By Me. And after you took your lead, then Ray Benson took his lead and Stanley Jordan took his lead. Stanley decided, remember, we extended the song.
Yeah.
It was just such a powerful moment, like you're saying. What was it like when you saw one of your guitar heroes? Because when I mentioned the idea of playing, and then I mentioned it to Stanley, and he was open to the idea, and I mentioned, would you like to play with Stanley Jordan? And you're like, you said, he's one of my heroes. Like,
yeah.
He's one of one of your guitar heroes.
Yeah.
So your hero walks across the stage to you. What did it feel like when you saw Stanley Jordan while we're playing a song, walk over to you, and he said, Andy. He literally, you and me.
Yeah.
And you played back and forth. What did it feel like to play Stand By Me? Your wife is cheering, literally jumping down in the audience.
Yeah.
And I saw you look at her.
It was pretty amazing. I kind of can't explain it, but it was a powerful night, and it was a powerful experience.
Did your body feel any different? Did it feel normal? Did it feel different? Because you had said how different it was after the accident, that there was before the injury and the accident, and then you've just been saying over and over how different it is. It's just all you trying to come back.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was pretty extreme, and I was pretty focused
Yes.
on what I was doing.
Yes.
So, and it felt good. It felt really good.
Seemed natural.
And,
He did.
It just seemed just natural.
It just was what it was. But yeah,
That is one of the things you just said
just
about
blew
how
us away.
focused you were. That was the difference. Like, as soon as I tried to explain what I'd been seeing in music therapy, that once could catch that ball, I had your attention. There's something called being absorbed. And I could see you be completely absorbed in the music. And otherwise, you were having a hard time with attention.
Yeah.
And that moment and that night, you were completely absorbed. And for me, I saw you fully. I didn't see any disability. I didn't see any.
He transformed.
You did. You came back. It was like you coming back fully.
Yeah, and that was a pivotal moment
It was.
in his recovery as well, because I believe it brought back a sense of self and a sense of self-confidence and you're right, that's who I am. And we all witnessed it.
And his whole community. I could see for Jeff McCord and everybody that had told me earlier, Andy didn't look very good.
Like 30 of our friends there.
That night was the moment. And your friends came up to me and told me the moment they saw you back. And it was like completely pivoted. Everybody thought that you probably were never going to make it back.
They were all crying when they came up to you.
And they did. They were crying and hugging on me, thinking I did. I'm like, you had done it. You had done it. We were all a part of it. But that moment, I saw you come back to your community. Your wife, she's been singing and cheering for you. But I did. I can tell you the conversations afterwards. Your whole friendship group said, they saw you back. And it was like giving you back. And that's what one of them said to me, you gave me back my friend. And I said, I didn't do it, Andy did it, but we've done it. It was all of us. And I couldn't have done it without Stanley. When Stanley, this world-class musician, went up to you, he brought you to a level I couldn't have brought you. I didn't know your abilities to play that way and from that place musically inside. And you just did things.
Well, he's just a natural guitar player.
Your hands just months before Andy could barely do this. Could barely make any independent movement. Yeah. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful moment for me. It was. Yeah.
And I'm just glad I still can do it. Amen. And,
amen.
And we're just
thanks to you.
All doing it together, making some racket and trying to have a good time.
And we did that.
We
did that, and we're still doing it. I'm going to ask you a question. I just want to ask this because I've asked everybody in my podcast. Just give me your definition. What is music to you? What is it?
Music's kind of a overwhelming concept to me. So
in what way is it overwhelming?
I couldn't really
just it's beyond words?
Mentally and emotionally, it can be very overwhelming.
Wow.
And it comes and goes. It's so, but I love it, and I'm hooked on it. So
It's on music.
so I'll be making racket till I'm making no more racket. So. Yeah.
What's music?
Music to me is a divine force. It's the only art form for me that you can be absolutely transported to another. You know, if you hear a song from your childhood that's had an impact on you, and you hear it, you're like physically, viscerally in your mind back exactly where you were when you first heard that song. And I don't know of any art form that can do that. And that's why it's not such a surprise, but it's such a mystery how music can be used in such a way, but it's just inexplicable. It's like God, you can't describe it.
So for all of us that you have allowed to be a part of your journey, I do want to say thank you. And I think there's a lot to you guys' love, your story, your music community, that you have just pulled together in such a special, powerful, magical way. But I truly do believe love is music. And music is love when I sit with you and I've been a part of your journey. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that and feeding this hope. By being on this podcast, I hope thousands and millions of people sitting in your shoes that get called into a situation they never want to be in, and yet find themselves that love, the music, the art of living and humaning well. And I think you two are wonderful, wonderful examples of rising to the occasion when love is required and showing us what love really is. So I can't thank you enough for sharing your story.
You're amazing. Thank you.
I'm really glad.
Yes, thank you.
And the one thing too that I realized that with music therapy and the work that you're doing, people don't have to be musicians to benefit from music therapy.
No, we all have musical brains. And it's the biggest thing. And early in my career, I did a really good job in this community of getting the referrals, make sure the doctors, because we only get patients by doctors referring them or therapists or case managers. And they used to, at the beginning, when I started here in 1990, only refer musicians and only refer musical. And I worked really hard to get that. Every human being, I am hearing impaired, deaf people, we are musical beings. So as long as you're breathing, from birth to grave, music therapy is appropriate and that power can be leveraged. So thank you for saying that. I want the whole world to hear you say that. It's the biggest misperception.
Yeah, you don't have to be an Andy Thomas or a Hope Young, but it changed everything for us, the music therapy, and it helped Andy come back.
Just keep trusting the music. Yeah. The music came back in every part of your being. It was so automatic, and hearing how your speech is so fluid, your memory's coming back, so much is coming back, and seeing you together, just keep trusting the music. And trusting that spirit that for some reason it is one of those phenomena, it's a mystery that I love spending my whole life on exploring and unleashing and unlocking for at least, I loved it. I love treatment. I love healing. I love saving lives with music. It's my thing. So
thank God for you.
Thank you for teaching me so much.
Well,
and
thank you.
Showing me the power, truly the power of music.
Yeah.
And I'm an advocate for it. So thank you. You truly are the power of music.
Oh, thank God. Thank for you.